Greetings and welcome, everyone, to the 21st episode of the Mystery Hour with Con Sweeney at noon Second Life time, or 3 p.m. Eastern for you folks in real life. Now, to what we're about today. We're a monthly show based here at Second Life. We broadcast live from here on Facebook and YouTube every third Monday of the month at 12 p.m. Second Life time, or Pacific time. Again, for you folks in real life who join us here. We meet mystery authors and others from the publishing world to talk about books and the issues facing them today, from social and technological change. And there's certainly a lot of that these days. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Drax and Desprez, host of the Second Life Book Club and the Drax Files Radio Hour, both broadcast from Second Life, for his sponsorship and the early use of the Book Club Island when we first got started. I'd also like to thank Strawberry Linden and Brett Linden for their help in setting this show up. And finally, my eternal thanks to Becky Hansen and Isabel Charon for their technical assistance in making this happen. Without you, it wouldn't have been possible. Now, our regular viewers may notice that we're no longer on Book Club Island, the reason being that there's a lot going on over there these days, and setting up for our show is becoming a bit of an effort. So we decided to come over here to our own studio, and here we are. Now, allow me to introduce today's guest, Jennifer J. Chow, author of L.A. Night Market, Winston Wong, and the Mimi Lee Mystery Series. Jennifer's latest book, Death by Bubble Tea, is due out soon and is available for pre-order. Watch for it. Welcome, Jennifer. How's
Thank
it feel
you.
being Second Life?
It's interesting. Thanks for having me here.
We're glad to have you. And yes, interesting is the word for Second Life, or the metaverse, as the world is now starting to call it, thanks to our friend Mr. Zuckerberg. Jennifer, as we get started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey as a writer, what motivated you to write, and what life has been like for you as a writer during the pandemic?
That's been definitely different from the pandemic. I've always wanted to write, even when I was a kid. So I used to, write in my notebooks and borrow my dad's typewriter and write stories. So I think I've always been a writer and a reader at heart. Part of what drew me to mystery writing is because I enjoyed reading those mysteries so much. And I did find that there was a lack of representation in those mysteries. And I kind of really wanted to write stories that would have an Asian American protagonist at the heart of them. So I think that's kind of how the writing journey happened. And the pandemic was interesting as well because I'm used to writing in quiet places and having silence while I write, and that totally got upended during the pandemic. I basically ended up with, a house full of family, which made it difficult to write like I usually did. And I think for a while, just the impact of the news and everything that was going around us made it really, really difficult to write. And I'm really grateful for some of my writer friends who came along beside me and just continue to write with me, and we would have writing sprints over text.
Interesting. Many of our guests have a very similar story to what you're talking about. The desire to write from an early childhood, being drawn to the mysteries, thrillers. If I had $1 for every time somebody said they started with Nancy Drew or the Hardy Boys, I'd be wealthy. I also give you a lot of credit for wanting to broaden and diversify the genre. It's a genre that for a very long time had been dominated by the Sherlock Holmes, the Miss Marples, and particularly here in the United States, when we have a much broader, diverse community, we really need to reflect everyone and have stories from everyone. And I enjoy reading the various stories from the different groups. So I think it's wonderful what you and the other writers are doing. Where do you
Thank
get
you.
Where do you get the inspiration from your stories? For your stories?
They come in different ways. I feel like every story has sort of a different origin. It kind of depends. I've been inspired from things just like conversations around me. Once I got inspired by a dictionary definition of a word.
Cool.
I find that cozy mysteries, which is what I'm currently writing in the mystery genre, it, usually I will start with the characters. So for the Winston Wong series, which I indie pubbed, that one came from the protagonist who's in the Silicon Valley. He's an ex video game tester, and so he came formed as a character in my head. And then Mimi the Mimi Lee ones, which are actually the Sassy Cat mysteries, that one probably came from the theme. Usually cozy mysteries have a hook, and so this cozy mystery has a pet groomer as the lead, and so it's animal themed. And I think it came from this idea of having a Los Angeles pet groomer. She runs this shop called Hollywood, and then her sleuthing partner, is not just a regular human, but her, telepathic sassy cat Marshmallow. And then the new series coming out, the LA Night Market mysteries, that came from maybe a mesh of the both, because I've done a lot of visits to night markets in Asia and in Canada and the US. So it came from that love for food, but then it also came from this idea of having two cousins who run the food stall, and they have opposite personalities, and they're even from, like different upbringings, just their family upbringing. And then one grew up in Hong Kong, one is in the US, and just coming together and running a food stall and also trying to solve murders.
Of course.
Great. As you do.
It sounds like a fascinating series, and I can't wait to read the book when it comes out. And by the way, is there a published date for that?
Yes. So the first book is called Death by Bubble Tea. It comes out July 5th.
Okay, well, I'll be looking forward to it. I certainly want to pick up my copy. Do you have a favorite mystery thriller author?
That's a loaded question. I think, well, I mean, I give props to Agatha Christie, because that's sort of what I really read when I was reading more adult mysteries, I guess you would say. And I started, as an aside, I started with Encyclopedia Brown. But yeah, I read Agatha Christie with my mom, and so that was definitely a big influence on me. And then I think throughout the years, just different authors, Joanne Fluke for her kind of baking series with that cozy theme, and just the fact that we could have lighthearted mystery series. And then I think for like Asian American mystery authors, I had actually encountered Dale Furtani first in May in this, AAPI Heritage Month, and at the library. And so that's how I finally figured out that actually, oh, maybe this could be something that I could also do, that there was a Japanese or Japanese American protagonist in his books. And also I think Naomi Hirahara is a great inspiration for me, and just all her solid plotting and just her encouragement as I started out in my mystery writing career. And then who else? Oh yes, I belong to a group blog called Chicks on the Case. So we're mystery writers with a killer sense of humor. So it's chicksonthecase.com, and all the people on that blog I do admire and are inspirations to me.
I love the name. I've got to check them out. Thank you.
Yes, we have a mascot too, Agatha Christie.
The Agatha Christie or
Agatha Christie.
okay. Could you tell us a little, please, about the Crime Writers of Color and how it's helped you?
Yeah. Crime Writers of Color is a community that grew up out of a need to have that diversity shown in mystery stories, and it came out of people really needing that support. It's hard to break into the publishing industry in general, but as diverse and writers of color, it's kind of doubly hard to do so. And I got in, actually was invited, or I don't know if invited is the correct word, but told about the group through Naomi Hirahara, and she mentioned that, oh, they're starting this group, and it'll be great to, have that community. And it has been just wonderful being able to share, triumphs and trials, and just encourage everybody. It's Yeah, it's been really amazing to um, be together, come together, and just kind of lift each other up.
That's great to hear. I think, as you know, we've had several members of your organization on this show for the last several months, and I want to give a shout out to Kelly Garrett and thank her for sending out the invitation to the group. Um, and I think it's marvelous that there's a group to help with the networking. And you're right, breaking into publishing these days is very difficult, and I can imagine that for writers of color, it's even harder. So anything that can be done to help people get their stories out and get into the marketplace, I think is a good thing. And I'm really happy that we'll be able to meet so many members from this marvelous group. Could we talk a little bit about your characters in your books, Jennifer? Is there Can we find you in any of them?
I mean, in some way you can find me in all of them, right? Because they come from my imagination. So I guess yes. Let's see. For the last two series, I think bits and pieces of the protagonists in the Sassy Cat series with Mimi Lee. I'm not a pet groomer by profession, but she has some of my background in terms of the uh, she has a tie to UCLA, went there for school, which I also did, and then she um, has a close knit family. Her mom is Malaysian Chinese. My dad is Malaysian Chinese, so that kind of culture and family aspects are definitely something that I can relate to. And then with the new series, there are two cousins, Yale and Celine Yee. Yale is American, and so I think for her, we kind of relate on maybe personality levels in terms of she's bookish, and when we first meet her, she's working at this bookstore called the Literary Narnia, and she just really enjoys escaping to books and kind of has that um, reserved side of her. So I think that definitely reflects some of, my personality.
Good. Okay, the next question may be an unfair one, but do you have a favorite character? Now, I know that's like asking a parent which is their favorite child, but I have to ask it.
Oh, that's really hard. So I I can't I cannot say that I have a favorite character, but I would say that one of the most fun characters to write is Marshmallow, who's that talking sassy cat in the Sassy Cat series, because it's just so much fun to uh, first to have that perspective from like a feline perspective of humans, like what's going on in the human world, and he's pretty unfiltered, so he can say whatever he wants and crack all the jokes, and it's just a lot of fun to play with that. I also grew up reading a lot of Garfield comics, so I think I like kind of channeled some of that into the Sassy Cat, and it was nice to have that sort of comic character.
Well, this is another first for our show out there for our folks in the audience. Jennifer is the first writer here who's actually taken a perspective of the human race from a feline point of view. So, check out check out the Sassy Cat series. Um, Jennifer, let's go back to the writing profession itself. How difficult is it for writers to get started today? As I meet writers on the show, and I also am on the board of directors of the New York chapter of Mystery Writers of America, and I meet many writers there. What I hear is it's getting harder and harder. We have the consolidation of the publishers into fewer and fewer. I think we're at four, maybe three now. I've lost track. Um, it's hard to get an agent. just how difficult is it? I noticed that one of your books, your first one, I believe it was indie published. How's that affect
Yeah, I've gone on a journey. Let me say that, because I think it's like a paradox almost, because I feel like in some ways it's easier to get published because there are more avenues for publishing. So there's traditional publishing, there's self-publishing, there's working with a small press, there are hybrid presses out there. Make sure you do your research on those. So I think there are different avenues, but then on the other side there is a lot of consolidation, and there are a lot of books out there. So it's like, how do you also, I guess, break out of the masses that way? So for me, my journey, so I have multiple genres I write in, I guess. So when my first actual book that's not mystery, it's more women's fiction, multicultural women's fiction inspired by historical events that happened in Taiwan. It's actually called The 228 Legacy. And that came out through a small press. Eventually, I got my rights back and then republished that. And then I have a young adult novel, which is Dragonfly Dreams, and that came to a different small press that ended up folding. And then I have my indie mystery series, which is the Winston Wong Cozies, that I self-published. And part of the reason was I was getting a little bit of feedback of, do we want this character having his background, and also interestingly having a male lead in a cozy mystery was a little bit not a great, I guess, marketing point. And so part of it was that, and part of it was I wanted to try the indie space. And then part of it was also there were some health issues in my family, and I kind of wanted to get it published in time for one of them to read some semblance of the manuscript. So I think that was like a different factors. So I feel like it is kind of hard, and how I got into the Sassy Cat series was through that indie series. So I did everything sort of backwards. Usually people do the query and they find the agent, and then the agent submits on their behalf. And I did it sort of backwards in that an editor from Penguin Random House found my indie work and then approached me, emailed me, and asked me if I was interested in writing like an animal themed cozy with an Asian American female lead, and if I was interested to send sample chapters. So I sent the sample chapters in. I actually thought I didn't get it. Well, first, in the very beginning, I actually thought maybe it was like, I don't know, a phishing email or a scam, but I double checked with my colleagues, which is great. So please have a writing community so they could tell me if it was, accurate or not. And then I, months later after I sent sample chapters in, they actually contacted me back. So, oh yeah, we actually really enjoyed your sample chapters. And so that's how I got my first contract for the Sassy Cat series.
Very good. A great story there. How has technology been affecting the publishing world, in your opinion? The impact of Amazon, the internet, ebooks. I know, I live in the New York City area, and for the last 20 years, we've been seeing many small bookstores go away. Borders, a number of years ago, shut down. That was one of the large, big box stores. Some people have been claiming that independent bookstores are making a comeback. I'm not so sure about that myself. I think that's maybe whistling past the graveyard on some people's parts, although I would love to see them come back. What do you think technology has done to the writing, publishing profession, and where might it go?
I think in some ways it's a hindrance, because I feel like, yes, you're right. When Amazon came on the scene, it's definitely has a huge market share with ebooks and even physical books, right? So I feel like I think we'll see where that goes. But I also think that there's a flip side, right, which is the positive parts that I like to focus on, which is the idea of technology helping writers in a way. Like it's easier in a way to submit. You have everything electronically now, which is
Sure.
nice.
Yes.
I had I remember getting some query letters back in the day, and waiting, putting in the self-addressed stamped envelope, and so everything is a faster turnaround. And technology helps in turning around even like edits on your manuscript. So I think that part is helpful. And then there are things that I feel like are interesting. I wonder how they will turn out because there's a lot more different ways of telling stories. I feel like I'm hearing different methods of doing so, whether that's serial fiction and making things episodic, or whether that's making almost gamifying some of it and having visual graphics and then a storyline with that. So I feel like there's some interesting ideas out there. I mean, I still like printed pages, and I like paper, and I like the feel of physical books. But I may do both. I read electronically, and I read with hard copies, and I I'm hoping that technology is a way to make things more affordable and accessible for people, and to get more readers on board.
Yeah, I've got mixed feelings. Change is inevitable. It's going to happen. It's the genie's out of the bottle. One area where I found the current state of affairs is very helpful is uh, backlist for writers.
Mm-hmm.
I've got several clients in real life who promoting a backlist is a lot easier now because there are copies available. Yes, they're digital, uh, or for the real hardcore fanatics who like the feel of the book, there's services like Libris where you can find used copies of books. So I think there's pros and cons here, pardon the pun. Um, but I find your observations about gamification, introducing new media into books interesting, and it could certainly make things very different in the future and how we go to market. Um, what do you think the publishing world may look like in the future? And the reason I ask the question is this, Jennifer. I've noticed that many of the big name mystery thriller writers who are out there right now, they really got their start before all these technical changes started. It was still pretty much a traditional market. You had plenty of stores, everything was hard copy. Amazon was just beginning to feel its way in. They became established. But I haven't seen any blockbuster authors in the last several years since all this change swept over the publishing world. And it's got me wondering, is the blockbuster author a thing of the past? What do you think?
I I'm thinking that there always will be backing behind certain authors. So I feel like, I mean, there are lead titles for publishers where they will, push certain titles and boost certain titles more. So I feel like there is support that way. I just think that I think it can happen, and I think there's been buzz around some new authors. I just think it's really difficult in general to have like a blockbuster, even like a blockbuster product, I would say, because there's so many things vying for our attention. So
Sure.
I think it's just like this, I don't know, this generation of like, you have you know, streaming, and you have other things that are kind of in the same entertainment sphere, I guess. And I think that's probably why it's hard to see that blockbuster happening. And actually, to be honest, the last couple of years, I feel like we all kind of want to go to comfortable places. And I feel like talking about backlists and all these things, it's like, it's natural. And I think people and readers wanted to go back to, nice memories. And so there are a lot of going back to authors that are like already established and big names.
Yep. Yeah, and it's certainly a lot easier to get copies of their books. Thank you. That's a very interesting observation on where we're going, and I'm sure it's something we'll be talking about for many years in the future. Jennifer, do you have any advice for upcoming aspiring writers these days?
I would definitely say be part of a community. Make sure that you have that support. I think writing can be lonely in a way. I guess it's a solitary, you put your words on your page or on your screen. And so I think that you can sort of maybe forget that there can be a community, and I think that community is really needed because I think writers do end up facing rejection, whether that's a short story or a poem or whatever it is, agents, editors. So I feel like that having that community and having people who know are in the trenches, so to speak, is really helpful. I would also say to have a different idea of what the timeline could be to reach goals, and not to compare yourself with other people, to compare yourself with yourself and kind of what things have you achieved, and maybe look at, do a look back on, oh, 3 years ago I was here, 5 years ago I was here. Because I feel like the publishing timeline is very extended. It takes a long time, especially if you're going the traditional publishing route. It definitely takes a long time to maybe reach certain goals that you've put for yourself.
Very good advice. Very good advice. Do you have any future projects you can tell us about?
Well, I am working on the LA Night Market mystery series. So the second book should be coming out next spring. It is titled Hot Pot Murder. So yes, there's a hot pot meal in there. And then I'm actually working on a proposal for a new potential culinary cozy series. So we'll see how that one goes. I'm still formulating things, but
Good. I'll certainly look forward to that. And I love hot pot, even if there isn't a murder involved in it. Uh-oh. One of the early casualties of the pandemic were the writer conferences. I remember Left Coast Crime in early 2020. A friend of mine was there, and they stopped in the middle, and everybody had to go home. And they're starting to come back now. Some of them are hybrid. CrimeCon is taking place in Connecticut in a couple of weeks. I believe New England Crime Bake is going to take place. Others are still out there. I haven't heard anything. Are you planning on attending any, or do you have any recommendations for ones to attend?
I I have I've already attended. So I actually was at that Left Coast Crime in 2020, and I remember I was there because I did one panel, and then I went to sign our books, which actually were not there because the bookseller had ended up pulling out, right? So there were there were no books, and then shortly after everything shut down. So yeah, it was really kind of yeah, once in a lifetime experience, I hope. Yeah. So I actually ended up going to Left Coast Crime this year. I've They put Left Coast Crime and Malice Domestic really close together this year, about 2 weeks apart. So I went to both, and Left Coast Crime was it was a lot of fun, and I think people were excited to be back, seeing people, you know, in like 3-dimensional space,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I think, yeah, I appreciate it just being able to go back and cheer people on, and also even give support to the authors who maybe kind of missed some of that support, because when you're published through in the pandemic, it's kind of hard to really have that same sort of recognition sometimes. Just yeah, especially if in the beginning, like I had a book out in March 2020, right? And so it was everything was changing and pivoting. Um, I also went to Malice Domestic, which is really nice if you're interested in the traditional mystery genre. That's a really, I think, warm place to go, and very welcoming. It always happens in Bethesda, Maryland, annually. So I think that's one I would recommend. I'm also planning on a BoucherCon this year. This year's happening September, and so that's when I recommend if you really want to get like a sense of like the vastness of like mystery writing, and then having big name authors. But that one is I wouldn't go to that one first just because it's so huge. And then on the California side, we have a California Crime Writers Conference that happens every 2 years or so. And I would recommend that one if you're in California. And it's usually SoCal because it's co-sponsored with MWA SoCal, Sisters in Crime, LA. So I think I would recommend that for a smaller size one.
Certainly a good list. Now, I hope that they all get scheduled in the future and they stay scheduled, and we don't have a repetition of the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, Jennifer, we've come to the end of my questions. I'd like to thank you for joining us today. I'd like to thank the audience for being here with us. It's always fun to have new authors on the show talking about their books, and hope to have you back sometime in the future with some of your future books. So, folks in the audience, we're ending our fifth broadcast in 2022, and thank you for joining us. We're going to be taking our mid-year break next month in June to give our crew a rest and to participate in the Second Life anniversary events, which will be taking place throughout the month. But we have many more writers lined up, and we'll be back in July. Please join us again when Amar Awan, on July 18th, will be our guest. He's another member of the Crime Writers of Color community, and he's based in London. So our live broadcast is ending now, and please remember, you can contact me at consweeney@submiti.com if you have suggestions for panelists, ideas for shows, or wish to participate yourself. I'm learning that putting on a show like this isn't easy, so if you'd like to volunteer to help out on our stage group, let me know as well. Thank you all for joining, and see you again in July. Stay
Thank you
safe.
so much.
Thank you, Jennifer.